Couldn't tell you.
Leaving. He just handed in his resignation.
Can't leave, Mr. Reynolds.
We're about to start.
Thanks.
Did we make sure the door was locked?
Oh, yeah, please do that.
The door open.
No, we had one where the door was locked.
He comes in, we'll turn it over to him. I don't know.
His commitment, right?
He's not gonna make it.
Okay.
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Let the record state that the meeting started at 5:06. We have public hearings at 5:05, administrative public hearing to consider the tentative millage rates and tentative county budgets for the fiscal year 2018 to 2019. We'll begin our meeting, if everybody will stand. Larry Harvey will give us the invocation, and Commissioner Lible will lead us in the pledge.
Let's bow our heads. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for today, and we thank you for a wonderful opportunity to move Putnam County forward. Father, we ask that everything we do and say be done in accordance with what you would have us to do in your will in this meeting tonight. We ask that you bless everything that happens here. Bless Putnam County. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Harvey and Commissioner Lible. And as I found out about 2 minutes ago, our chairman, Commissioner Goddard, will not be here. I'm Bill Pickens, I'm the vice chair, so I'll be chairing this meeting this evening. Our first order of business, as I said, is the administrative public hearing on the tentative millage rate. Administrator Suggs, would you like to say a few things, or we turn it over to Stacey Patel and Matt Reynolds?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up quickly with Commissioner Goddard, who is not here. Spoke with me, was tied up with the commitments today with some of our citizens and was unable to break away long and quick enough to get here tonight. He sends his apologies. However, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Papel for the, and Mr. Reynolds for the presentation and for the reading of the ordinance.
All right, so first of all, we'll run through the presentation real quick. It shouldn't take very long, maybe about 10 minutes or so, depending on if we have any questions. I gave all of the commissioners a copy of the presentation, and everybody else should be able to follow along on the television monitors. Okay, so this is the first reading of the budget. We'll have the second reading, which is the final adoption of the budget, on September 25th, that evening, 5:05. Okay, going back to what we talked about back in July, we began this fiscal year with a 9.8892 millage rate. The County Commission adopted the maximum millage rate in July of 9.6622, and tonight we're proposing a tentative final millage rate of 9.5946. The total decrease from the current fiscal year millage rate is about 0.2946, or about 3%. The general fund reserves, we began this fiscal year with about $4.9 million per the independent auditor's report that Mr. Smith and Mrs. Frank presented to the commission, as well as our independent auditors presented to the commission at the last meeting. In July, we forecasted to end this fiscal year with approximately $6.3 million in reserves. That number has been revised to be $7.3 million in reserves at the end of this fiscal year. So projections did quite a bit better than anticipated from back when we were working on those in May and June. And again, the general fund continues to be balanced without the use of reserves.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, if I can interrupt Mr. Reynolds for just a second. As you know, we began the year with a 9.8892 millage rate, came back in July at the workshop with a proposed 9.6622 millage rate. We were challenged to go back out and see what we could do about getting that millage rate down even further. And this is an opportunity for me to thank our constitutional officers for what they've done for us. As you know, Supervisor of Elections, the Honorable Charles Overturf, when he turned his budget in originally, it already had a decrease in it. Would like to thank the Honorable Tim Smith, our Clerk of the Court, for working with us again after the original presentation in July to help us get a lower millage rate, and also our Sheriff, Sheriff Gator Deloach, the Honorable Gator Deloach, who also worked very closely with us and gave back as well when we went back to work on the budget. And that's why we're able to go from a 9.6622 to a 9.5946. So I want to thank my constitutionals for working so closely with me and my staff. Thank you.
Next slide, page 3, shows the budget changes from the current fiscal year total budget for all funds of about almost $117 million. What we presented back in July, the proposed budget at that time was about $122 million. But as Mrs. Papel and I mentioned, we knew that number was going to go up quite a bit once we were able to determine what projects were not going to be finished by September 30th, as well as new grant projects that we were awarded and accepted. So as of now, the tentative total budget is $133,810,165. That is an increase of just a little over $12 million from what was presented in in July. The vast majority of that increase is due to carry forward of current capital projects and new grant-funded projects that have been approved. Slide 4, out of the 34 funds that we have budgeted amounts for, 13 of the funds had no changes. 10 of them have changes only to balance forward and reserves, and 11 of them have changes in addition to balance forward and reserve changes. So page 5 shows you all of the funds that only had changes to the balance forward and reserves. So the first column shows the total fund from back in July, and the middle column shows the change to the balance forward and reserves, and then the last column shows the current estimate of the total fund of each of those. Slide number 6, I went through the funds that had changes, other changes other than the fund balance and reserves, and wanted to put it kind of in this same table format from what we saw back in July to kind of show a breakdown within those funds of where those changes were made. And the first one is Fund 130, which is the E911 fund. You will see there at the top, the balance forward had an increase of almost $150,000. That was primarily due, again, from when we were working on projections back in April, May, and June. As it got closer to the end of the fiscal year, Mrs. Papel was able to determine that the balance forward would be quite a bit more. Right. Yeah, it's not going to happen by the end of this fiscal year. So on the expense side, we put that entire amount to the dispatch console upgrades, that portion of it for all of the other necessary things that are done to complete that project that the grant or the appropriation from the state is not going to cover. And that, again, we placed it there just so that it would cover any additional costs for that project, but there may still be, some leftover funds to carry forward. The next page, page 7, is the Tourist Development Fund. The only thing that changed in this fund was a revision to the anticipated revenues, and on the operating expenditure side, you'll see that that increase was then given out to all of the various expenditures within that fund because that is based on a formula that that we have used. You'll also see reserves had to be increased by $1. That was my mistake. I did not use a rounding formula in the spreadsheet, and Mrs. Papel found that. So
Bad boy.
I know.
After several hours, I believe, so
Yeah.
Matt owes her big time.
Page 8 is the Fund 133, the Economic Development Fund. A couple of changes in this fund. We increased the balance forward by approximately $16,000. That is, again, for the, I believe it's the True Trust incentive that was approved. And there is also an increase from the transfer from the general fund of $10,740. I'll let Mrs. Papel.
True Trust applied this year, and I have gone through it, but I haven't had time to write you an agenda item. They requested 2 years simultaneously, and there was nothing in the grant agreement. Stacy Manning and I both carefully went through it. Nothing prohibited them from requesting 2 years at once, as long as they qualified. I only budgeted for 1 year this year. This way, it's all in the budget, but they've earned it already.
Right.
So it's carry forward, it's not new.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those who don't, True Trust was an opportunity for us to keep a local business here in Putnam County by giving them incentives, or some type of financial incentives if they increase jobs. So it's actually tied to job creation.
And they did create
They
more
did.
jobs.
Thank you.
And they produced the evidence showing that.
Good, thank you,
Yeah,
Mr.
if I
Chairman.
could add to that, they are definitely, I think they're running 2 shifts down there. I think they're operating about 20 hours a day. So that's been a good addition in South Putnam.
And they've been very patient, because they made their application right as we were kicking off the budget process when I was at my busiest. And they are like, no, we know you're working on it. And I phoned them last week and said, it's probably not going to the commission until October, but it's in the budget. I didn't want you to think I forgot about you.
Okay.
And as you can see on the expenditure side, we put both of those increases in revenues down there in the grants and aids for that project. Page 9 is the Miscellaneous Grants Fund, 160. And what occurred in this fund is we took the $1 million for the fire station out of this fund, and we moved it to the capital fund, 308 fund. But we also received another grant, two grants for the health department, I believe, and that was the additional $55,000 that you'll see under operating expenses. Page 10, Fund 170 is the SHIP fund. What changed here is basically, again, balance forward, a more accurate projection of what we will carry forward into next fiscal year, and that money was, on the expense side, was allocated to the operating expenses for that project. Page 11 is the MSBU sinking fund. Small increase in balance forward. And down on the expenditure side, you'll see that all of the money that was previously set aside to be in reserves is moved up to operating expenses, as this fund has effectively, as of this moment in time, the sinking fund for the MSBUs have been satisfied, and next year we will do cleanup to take care of that remaining money within that fund. Fund 301 is Better Place. Under the internal services, you'll see an increase of about $1.5 million. That is balance forward, and that is primarily due to projects that are not going to be completed by September 30th, and so that will be carried forward. As you can see down in capital outlay, the 1.633, it's a little bit more than 1.5. That money was moved into the capital outlay to continue those projects to get them completed next year. Under the taxes line, you'll see an increase. That increase was due to Mrs. Papel looked at the state projections for revenue, as well as how revenue was coming in, and was able to adjust our estimates from July upwards. So that was very positive. Again, under capital outlay, majority of that money was allocated back to those projects to get them completed. Under the transfers, you'll see about 186,000 was added. 86,000 of that is for, yes, the floor home drainage match that I believe was just adopted at the last meeting.
Last meeting.
And that is being transferred to the 307 fund, which is the Road and Drainage Capital Fund. The additional 100,000 is going to the Enterprise Fund, which we'll talk about in a minute. And as you can see there, the reserves are increasing from what we had originally estimated back in July, increasing by about 25,000, still staying about 550,000.
Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, on that floor home drainage thing, grant, that's a 10% match. So we
Yes.
put 10% up and got 90% from a grant to do those canals out there in the Etna Creek Basin, hopefully all the way to Rice Creek. So that was a good investment on our part.
That is correct, yep. Okay, next page, 13, 307 Fund, Road and Drainage Projects Fund. Up at the top, you'll see intergovernmental revenue went up substantially, $6 million. Again, that is all of those projects that we discussed previously in July. Those are the unfinished projects that we'll be carrying forward. Balance forward, we were able to increase that estimate as well, primarily due to projects not being finished by the end of the year. Usually those have a match, and that is what resulted. The 85,800 again transfer from Better Place for that floor home drainage project, and the $175,000 increase in miscellaneous revenue is the anticipated revenue from Georgia Pacific on the County Road 216 project. Down on the bottom, you'll see under capital outlay a large increase in capital outlay, over $8 million. Part of that increase was due to the reserves decreasing. Mrs. Papel, again, went through, took a look at what those reserves consisted of. We discussed this back in July. Felt like a substantial portion of those reserves would be able to be used for resurfacing projects, and so we have added that to the $1 million that we had in the budget in July. Now that amount for resurfacing next year is $2.6 million. So within Better Place, and I think I left this out in Better Place, under capital outlay, the $4 million that we had for road and drainage projects has increased to $4.5 million. So in regards to various roadway projects next year, we have $4.5 million in Better Place and $2.6 million in the Road and Drainage Projects Fund. Yes, that as well, and of course the the grant funded projects that we have from DOT, Ashley Lake and Lake Susan, all of those. 308 fund is the Capital Projects Fund. As you can see, we added back in the $924,000. That is for the fire station, East Plaquemine Fire Station. We moved that from the 160 fund to this fund. That was the only change. Page 15 is 405 fund, the utilities fund. Small changes to charges for service, but under intergovernmental revenue, you'll see that we added about $2.1 million. Again, those are grant projects, 2 water management district projects, as well as the $850,000 appropriation from the state for the water line extension to the fire station, as well as carryover projects. Balance forward was a little bit lower than anticipated. So you can see there we have rebalanced that fund, and the additions were under capital outlay on the expenditure side. Last but not least, page 16 is the general fund. The first line, you'll see we reduced charges for service a little bit based upon updated projections. Intergovernmental revenue increased slightly. We did get a grant for the sheriff's office. I believe it was about 2 grants for the sheriff's office. One of them, I believe, was about 46,000. Yeah, about 18 something. As you can see here, the big changes to the general fund are the balance forward. Based upon updated projections that Mrs. Papel had done, we were able to increase our anticipated balance forward going into next fiscal year from the 6.3 million that we talked about in July to 7.3 million, which is very good news. Also, under taxes, you'll see the decrease of almost 300,000. That is primarily due to the decrease in the ad valorem millage rate. On the expenditure side, the 70,800 for grants and aids is for monies that were appropriated this year for the health department. They have requested to carry those forward into next year, and you'll see that on the reserves on the expenditure side are decreasing slightly versus what we're going to carry forward. We're starting the year with an anticipated 7,327,000, ending it with 7,245,000, and that is because of that carry forward that the health department had requested. If they had spent the money this year, the reserves would have been balanced out, and also the $10,740 transfer, that as well, because it was in this fiscal year budget, carrying it forward to next year for True Trust. You can see the transfers to the constitutional officers decreased almost 300,000. The sheriff did give back a little over 300,000. It doesn't show here because of that grant, that approximately $46,000 grant that came in on the revenue side, going out on the expenditure side, so it balanced out. And again, as you can see, reserves, we're estimating to end the year almost 7.3 million, 7,245,000. And that is all I had. Quick presentation. Tried to be quick.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Matt and Stacy. Commissioner Turner?
Matt, could we have a quick discussion on the reserves?
Sure.
I understand that last year that we only booked the reserves that were general fund reserves. I hope I'm giving the proper term. That this year we've had to pick up the reserves from all the different restricted funds and move them forward as part of our overall reserves. Is that correct?
Well, we would, in the past, the county would only include money that was needed to balance the budget. The entire amount of reserves was not in the budget. Only the amount that was needed to balance the budget if reserves were needed to balance the budget. So we have included the total amount of reserves for all of the funds.
Okay, so with that being said, are you saying that we're free to spend this amount of money for things that may pop up during the year that you can use reserves for, perhaps as not reoccurring expenses, or is some of this money restricted?
No, this is unrestricted reserves. But again, we've talked about, the county has a policy of 10% of the general fund budget as unrestricted reserves. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends 2 months, which is approximately 17%, just below 17%. But that is the entire amount within the general fund that is unrestricted. We wanted to put that in. It's not only state statute, but it's also good practice to have that in for transparency reasons as well. But that is the entire amount of unrestricted reserves. It's not the amount that is over the minimum or anything like that. Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Lible?
Okay, I would like to know the animal services money that's been dedicated. I don't find a line item for it. And is it in those reserves you're speaking of?
It's in Better Place.
It is in
And
Better
that-
Place?
yes.
In a holding pattern?
750,000 is in Better Place. Yes, sir.
And why couldn't I have that, or we ask for that to be broken out and dedicated? What would be?
It is. What we've presented here is not a line item budget. There's many, 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 many lines in the budget within that, but it is within the Better Place Fund. And we can get you a copy of the line item budget if you'd
That's
like to
fine.
see it, but it does specifically say animal shelter, 750,000.
That's good. Health Department, how much are we giving them annually now, Stacy?
Give her just a second and she'll look it up. If anybody else
My
has got any more
question's gonna
questions.
lead, I just wanna know that money, not for any particular reason. It used to be around 300,000. I wonder what has changed. So, is it? And then, does it, at some point, when they carry over like this, can the state encumber it from us?
The reason, Mary was going to be here tonight, but the reason she wants to carry over the little more than $70,000 is because of those 2 grant projects where they're doing capital improvements to our buildings. And she wants to use some of the money that she gets from us to assist in those grant projects to, and the state won't pay for buildings. So she's sort of been juggling all of her money so that next year she can use the money she gets from us that she usually uses to operate. She's using to augment those projects. And so she's bought operating things ahead with state money and done whatever she could to free up the money she gets from us to do the improvements that she so desperately wants to our buildings.
I'm good with all that,
Yeah.
but often when we change governors, so does the mission of the county health departments. You know, we saw it with this governor, I've seen it with another one, and it makes me wonder, they won't go into the mansion until January, but we should find out if that could happen or not. Because
And,
they could go on a whole nother mission pretty quick.
She's gonna keep looking. If we've got any other questions, we'll,
I can get that later. I'm more
yeah,
concerned.
whenever she finds it, I'll let you
They're
know.
mainly disease preventative control now. They used to be
Correct.
community clinics,
Yep.
and they could be something of a hybrid or something altogether different under new leadership. And I wouldn't want them to take our money.
Every year since I've been here, we've given them $229,200. This year, she is foregoing 70,800 of it to add to next year.
Okay.
Done? Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, concerning the reserves that you were talking about in general accounting practices, 2 months of reserves is what we ought to have, which equates to about 17%. But that's not 17% of our total budget. So what would that number be if you would like to have it in the bank right now?
I have not done the calculations on it. It would be your general fund operating expenditures, so you would have to strip out your one-time expenditures and take out things like the reserves. As you can see on slide 16, 58 million total fund. We'd have to take the approximately 7.3 for the reserves out. We would have to look through it, but it would be a smaller amount than the 58,000 currently in the general fund, and that's what you would do. Our policy says 10%, but recommended minimum for the Government Finance Officers Association is the 17%. But as long as we meet our policy, then we're okay legally. Well, according to the auditors.
Okay.
Something north of 8 million? Okay, approximately.
So not only did we increase our reserves, but we almost, with a little bit of help, maybe next year, we can have that goal in mind to hit that mark. Good, thank you very much.
That's
Appreciate
right. And a lot of counties and cities in Florida, the Government Finance Officers Association recommend the 2 months for completely unrestricted fund balance. A lot of cities and counties will assign fund balances. They'll create a hurricane fund or an emergency fund or that sort of thing, and then they'll have self-insurance, various other types of fund balances
In that.
in addition to their unreserved of 17%, sometimes even substantially higher, but yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay. Commissioner Turner?
I know that it's really prudent to try and raise our reserves as high as we can, but I want to also make the comment that we need to try and balance that against the needs of this county and things that we're trying to do and get done. I'm all for being financially responsible as much as we possibly can. There's got to be a balance there. If we put off things that we need to where it costs a whole lot more later on because we didn't do it now, we've done the wrong thing. So I don't think we should take reserves and pay reoccurring expenses. I'm not advocating that. But there's some one-time expenses around here that we need to fix, especially some drainage problems and some different things that, you know, I think we're gonna have to look at some of this, and I'm for raising the reserves, and I'm for being responsible, but I'm also for trying to help the citizens of this county where they can get in and out of their house without needing waist-high rubber boots. So if we can put in a drainage system or something that we haven't had to do in the past because we've had 25 years of dry times. So anyhow, I think we're just gonna have to really balance this going forward, or look at it and try to balance it against the needs versus, I understand completely what the recommendations are, but I recommend that my wife doesn't spend the money out of my checkbook, and it doesn't seem to help a whole lot every month, so. So anyhow, excuse me for doing that, but, yeah, I think we really need to look at this as a balance as we move forward,
right.
and I'm mainly saying it with the other commissioners that, you know, we've got some things that are not reoccurring expenses that we may could look at for some of this as we move forward. I'm all for making this reserve go up. I just don't want to make it go up so fast. I mean, it took them 9 years to bring it down from where it was, using it a little bit to balance for what they thought was gonna be short-term financial times. You know, I don't think we need to try to get it all back in 1 year.
I
Absolutely.
agree,
Yeah.
Commissioner Turner, that, yeah, we definitely need to build it up, but there are some needs, especially probably with drainage, that we need to probably look at. Maybe we could use some of that money, so. Do you
Miss-
have another comment?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Let's bear in mind and absolutely 100% agreement with, we need to fix the things that we need to fix for our community and our citizens. When we took this budget over in October 1 of this year, the challenge was to be very fiscally conservative, save money where we could, attack the concern we have with our decreasing reserves and our millage rate. And the vision that you five put out here to staff, you know, is the mission that we picked up and ran with. And I think what you're seeing here today is the results of your mission and vision, and the results of what staff has been able to work through this year to be able to put us in a position to have this very conversation now about, look, we're getting our reserves where they need to be. Now we need to look and see what we can spend these dollars on that will benefit our community as a whole and put us in a position to serve our citizens and attract, you know, new business and things of that nature, and increase our infrastructure and preserve our infrastructure. So these are all perfect conversations here tonight, which is a direct result of where we were from last year to this year. Now moving forward, our vision and our mission may change with this commission on what we allocate those dollars for. So I think this is a very prudent conversation to have, and I think we need to look at that very soon as we get ready going through October 1 through next year. So thank you very much, and we will certainly do that.
I don't want there to be any mistake that I'm trying to be critical of what we've done. I think you guys have done a fantastic job, utterly fantastic job. But I also just wanted to bring that up in this meeting, that while I'm wanting to raise the reserves as much as we can, I'm not wanting to do it to the detriment of some of the other things that we may have to do. And I think that would be a good discussion to have maybe before too long in a workshop of should we take some of these and do some things that need to be done, and then try again next year to get it a little higher as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Turner. Commissioner Harvey?
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on that comment, if you don't mind. You know, some of the projects that we have and have had on the books for a long time. You know, they didn't start out to be 100% funded by another agency. There was some skin in the game in Putnam County, and we've asked other agencies to help out, but it's time to bring those in for a landing. And there's going to be some costs associated to that on the county. But again, if you've got somebody paying half the bill, that's a really good deal. If they're paying 75% of the deal, that's even a better deal. And we just saw one a minute ago where they paid 90% of the bill. That's a really good deal. So again, I applaud Commissioner Turner for seeing that. We see some projects out there that weren't intended to be 100% funded by outside agencies, and it's time to bring those in for landing. And they very well might cost us. But we need to save face with these other agencies to show them that we're ready to finish these projects up and to bring this in before we go back up there with our hands out and say, we need more money. Do the projects you committed to do to begin with. That's my point. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments? Tim Smith?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the conversation, and as your comptroller that works, with your county administration and your budget officer, just to reiterate that there are prudent reserves that we have a goal to, and we're very close to that. If you look at the numbers, and y'all were calculating, and in my mind, I'm thinking it's around 8 million was the number. And the role of government is not to save money, except for to protect yourself from emergencies. That's what reserves are for. And so as those reserves are adequate, then that's the opportunity then to say, are we going to fund those other projects that the community desires to have happen? Are we going to lower the millage rate, or what are we going to do? So I think that as we move forward over the next few months, that our office would certainly be willing to participate in that process to really kind of establish what is our really reserve policy and our goal. And then to also, in that conversation, say, these are reasons we may dip into the reserve. So if it's that one-time opportunity to provide some great service to a part of the community, it might be that because of those reserves and ability to have those, we may be able to leverage that against other dollars that someone's providing. So I'm thinking what a stark contrast this conversation is from what it was a year and a half ago. And that, once again, is due to a lot of good factors, good hard work on all of your parts and your staff, but also an improving economy. And so this is our opportunity to really establish, what the reserve is for, what's the amount of it, how do we use those in times when they should be used. And we do that now while there's no emergency. So as times change, and they will again, that's how economies work. And but if we have a policy and positions in place now, then when those conversations have to come back around, if there is some drop off in revenue or something, then we know how we're going to handle that. So when we say that we're just trying to build all the reserves we can, that really is not the role of government. And I agree with Mr. Turner. It really is to provide services or either reduce the burden on the citizens that are paying those dollars. And I certainly support that position, and look forward to working with your staff to come up with the right policies and discussions as we move forward over the next few months. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. I believe I need to open up for public. Okay, at this point in time, we'll open up this, the public hearing or public comment portion of the meeting. Anybody wishing to make a comment for or against this budget? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public comment. We don't need to move this for a vote. This is just the first reading.
We do need to move this for a vote. We need to
do?
have two motions. The
Okay.
first motion is regarding the millage rate. I would ask that the title of the resolution be read, and then all 3 points, 1, 2, and 3, as part of the motion. I can read them, or whoever
We can
makes
do
the
it too.
motion.
We usually get a sample, which we don't
Well-
have.
I got it.
And,
You got a sample?
don't mind doing that at all. Or you can do the oratory and we can move the motion as stated by our financial
I would be glad
guru.
to.
Okay, do we need
Mr.
to, we'll need to vote on both of them?
First,
separately.
the first motion must be on the millage.
Okay.
The second motion on the budget.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the fiscal year 2018 Putnam County countywide operating millage is 9.5946 mils.
I'll second that motion.
I
Nope.
need more words, please.
Yes.
Shall I read the
Can we
words
go
I
back
need?
to what Commissioner Lible suggested, is you give us a motion of what it needs to say, and then we'll move it?
It's right.
Well, that's what I.
She needs all
I
that
had
read.
right here. But you said you wanted two motions, one that just outlined, excuse me, Mr. Commissioner Harvey, I didn't mean
No,
to.
you're fine.
You said you wanted a motion that gave the
Millage.
millage, and that's what I think the attempt was. What, do you want?
It's got to be
I can
full
do all three.
resolution 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, I was misunderstood. I thought you wanted two motions.
One motion on millage that's, first read a resolution of the Board of County Commissioners so that Putnam County is in the name and everything, and then read 1, 2, and 3 on the resolution.
All of
Okay,
that is the first
And
one.
then you
All
want,
that in the first motion.
then
Thank
you want a motion on the budget separate from
Exactly.
that. Okay,
Exactly.
now I understand, sorry.
That's not what he just said. We can
It
do it
is,
all in
yes,
one.
no, that's right. All of this.
For just the
in
millage
first-
rate.
In the
Okay.
first one, and then the second motion after
Mr.
that.
Chairman.
For the total budget amount.
Commissioner Harvey?
Well, I think you need to withdraw your second, right?
Yes, sir, withdrawn, call,
Okay.
color it withdrawn.
Mr. Chairman, I move the resolution of the Putnam County, of the Board of County Commissioners, Putnam County, Florida, adopting the tentative levy of ad valorem taxes for Putnam County for fiscal year 2018 and 19. The fiscal year 2018-19 Putnam County tentative countywide operating millage is 9.5946 mils, which is 2.63% higher than the calculated rollback rate of 9.3483 mils. The fiscal year 2018-2019 tentative non-countywide operating millage for the fire tax unit, municipal services taxing unit, referred to as MSTU, is 1.1 mils, which is the same as last year's millage rate, which is 5.88% higher than the rollback rate of 1.0389 mils, together with an aggregate millage of 10.5643 mils, which is 2.93% higher than the aggregate rollback rate of 10.2639 mils.
I second
Okay, so
that motion.
We have a proper motion, and we have a proper second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes.
Now, do you want the actual resolution that's been put in this packet right here, or is it, or did what he just read count for that?
What he just read counts for item number 6 on the packet. Now I need item number 7 from the packet. A motion adopting the tentative budget, all funds for fiscal year 2018-19.
I don't have 6
I
or
don't
7.
have 6 or
We
7.
don't have what you
We don't have that.
That's what I'm saying.
This page?
No.
Should, page 2?
Yes, I do, page 2, okay.
I don't have it. I know it.
Okay, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
I have it.
There it is.
First thing I look for when I sat up here.
So you need the one that covers 6 and 7?
No, I just need
No,
item
7.
number 7.
Okay.
You're on.
Well, we've got, did we vote? We hadn't voted on that.
Yes, we
one yet.
did.
Okay. Just one minor housekeeping is if this resolution is what we just voted on a minute ago, we need to make sure that it's changed for Vice Chairman Picken to sign instead of Chairman Goddard, because he is not at the meeting presiding today.
Very good point, and I will reprint it.
Okay, and with that being said, Mr. Chairman, I move that we pass a motion adopting the tentative budget, all funds for the fiscal year 2018-19 of $133,810,165.
Second.
Okay, we have a proper motion and a proper second. Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Great job, guys. Outstanding.
Okay, the next item of business is a public hearing to consider and repeal the replacement of the Putnam County Ordinance number 2005-35, purchasing procurement policy. Melissa Dillon, Administrator Suggs, would you like to start or just turn it over to Melissa Dillon?
No, we'll turn it over to Ms. Melissa Dillon, our procurement officer.
Thank you. What you have before you is a complete repeal of our current procurement ordinance and replacing it with the new ordinance that is before you. Our current ordinance was adopted in 2005, and it was amended several times over the years, but it is 13 years old. So this new ordinance provides us the opportunity to bring our purchasing policies a little more up to date, help us to more closely mirror current state statutes on purchasing. It allows us to incorporate language that is now required for federal and state funding. And it addresses some of the issues that were identified in the state audit. And it codifies some of the practices that we have since the audit implemented to address those issues. So I feel it is a real advancement forward in our purchasing department to be able to offer you this new procurement ordinance, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Harvey?
Ms. Dillon, I have no questions, but I want to thank you. It's a long time coming. How long? 3 years that this thing has been worked on, and I really appreciate it. What I really appreciated the most was the ability to meet one-on-one with you and our administrator and go through there and highlight the problems that I saw, and I'm sure every other commissioner felt that had their situations they went over. Then we worked it over in a workshop and brought it back, and we added veteran-owned businesses to this mix, which was an outstanding process. And I just really want to applaud you for the hard work. I know it's been a long time. Stacy, I know you were working on it too, Mr. Manning. But it's been a long time coming, and this is a fine document, and I appreciate it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Turner?
we had talked before the meeting about adding small business to that paragraph and also putting a definition in the back for small business. Do we need to include that as part of the motion, or will that just be done that we make the changes to this to include the small business definition and the addition of small business to the paragraph 2-100.3?
Well, I would have to defer to the attorney, but I would feel like that would need to be part of the motion, that you're amending what's before you to include small business, both in the title of that section as well as the paragraph of that section.
Well, I desire to move this forward today, but I also desire to have that placed in there, and so I thought we had talked about it earlier, but maybe not. So unless the commissioners don't agree that small business should be included along with the others, then yes, I would like for that to be part of the motion.
I support it.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yep.
Are we ready?
That would need to be included in the motion, and we would need specific language that you want changed in this ordinance.
I've already given it to her earlier, but I'd be happy to do it again if necessary. Can I give it to her now before the motion and then include the language with the motion? I mean, that we want the changes that were given?
Yes.
Okay. Basically, my pages are different than yours, Melissa. So I think you're on page 16 and I'm on 32.
Correct.
It's 2-100.3 where it says minority women business enterprises, MBE, and veteran-owned enterprises. We also want small business enterprises in the title and in the paragraph below to be included as part of the acceptable encouragement that we're gonna use. And that's actually mimics the state and federal MBE stuff and small business stuff in the back that she had to put in verbatim, that actually is where the small business came from. And then under the definitions on the proper alphabetical order, I think we need to include a definition for small business. And I think small business usually is like any business that employs less than 50 employees, I think is what the definition for small business is. So I don't know if we want to use that, or if I don't know if we want to use that as, or pick another number or whatever, but our definition of small business can be pretty much what we want to put it at, correct?
We're thinking over here.
I would probably recommend going with the state definition. of
Yes.
small business.
That's fine with me, whatever that is whatever state level it is, but the state or the feds, whichever one, I mean, we put it in the back because we had to match for grant information, we had to put it in there. So I think what we need to do is, could we put it in there that it said that it matches the state's definition for a small business enterprise?
Well, the problem is that there may be more than one definition depending on,
Well, I'm sure there's more than one definition of a minority business enterprise or a veteran-owned enterprise or all these others too, but we got to come up with one that we can live with today.
yeah, but in an ordinance, if you're proposing language in the ordinance, we need to know exactly what that language is that's being proposed.
Okay, well, as a definition, the language would be that we included a definition that a small business enterprise is someone that has less than 50 employees.
Mr. Chairman, I definitely agree that I'd like to see this thing get moved forward tonight. But I think it would behoove us at this point, if we could, let's table this for tonight, bring it back on the 25th, because I'd like to get us a proper definition that fits our procurement policy as we move it forward. I think Commissioner Turner brings up an excellent point that we need to have that definition included. So if it's the will of the commission, let's table this for tonight, and we'll look for the proper definition. We'll include it in the amended. We'll make the other changes that's been requested here tonight and bring that back on the 25th if it be the will of the commission.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we table this till September 25th meeting.
Okay, do we need a second on that, I guess? Okay, we need a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? I do have a question. We only have to read this one time.
Correct.
This one time, the other two. Okay. All right, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Okay, motion will be tabled. Okay, I'd be remiss if I didn't start with comments from the Honorable Tim Smith all the way over to the right, if you have anything else to say.
No item, sir.
County Administrator?
Yes, sir, just real quickly, thank you folks for your support of staff here tonight. And also, I know you all have a copy of tomorrow's agenda for the 9/11 ceremony. I received one today in an email. I just want to make sure that, I heard that we were going to break at 10 tomorrow, but it looks like they're going to be starting with the honor guard at 9:55 in the morning. So I'll remind Chairman Goddard of that. Would like for us to be able to make sure we get out there on time tomorrow. So, but anyway, thank you for your support here tonight.
Okay. County Administrator, or County Attorney, Stacy Manning?
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner comments, starting with Commissioner Lible?
Good. Thank staff and Melissa for all the improvements to the system, and look forward to exercising.
Commissioner Harvey?
I utter the same comment. Melissa, Ms. Dillon, thank you for all your hard work again on the document, the procurement, and thanks again to all the staff and our department heads who really stepped up this year, and our constitutional officers to help bring this budget in, and I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Turner?
Under Commissioner comments, I would like to ask that when we do our workshop next week, the one not tomorrow, but the one next week that we add to the list of the many growing list of things we're gonna talk about that day. I'd like to talk about the letter that I saw on the 9-mile recreational property. And what's our next step? Where do we wanna go? I mean, we've got multiple options here. I think it's sat around long enough. You know, we did a great job, or Angie did, or Miss Wishnet did, by getting us a letter that said, from somebody that was basically looked to me like, it was maybe a recommendation with some figures of about what they thought, but it was on the conservative side. So probably the next step would be, if we decide to move forward, would be to have a real management plan done that we can send to the people that we have to get the permission from before we can thin timber or generate revenues or do any of that stuff, and use that money towards making that property a better property. There was several $100,000 worth of timber on there, and it was conservatively looked at. And so I think we just need to discuss that project and see where it needs to go next and what we want to do with it. Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And I'd just like to thank Melissa for all the hard work on the purchasing and procurement process. The policy definitely was needed, and appreciate your hard work. And Stacy Papel, Matt, great job. County Administrator Suggs, County Attorney, constitutional officers, all the department heads, thank you. We set out with a goal this year, and looks like we've accomplished it, and look forward to moving forward next year. So anyway, is there any other further business to come before this board? We stand adjourned.